My background was in large-scale systems in college, and I worked on some huge systems for very big companies, as you noted, some of the biggest in the world. But I never really saw myself at that level. I was like, I want to grow to be $1 million company. If you lose a client, you still have most of your revenue. What I have seen small companies grow to that 5, 10, 20 million pretty fast. Top 5% companies are growing exponentially. Competition is passing you. The ideal person is, I hate that. Why don't you do it? I feel like if you put the investment you would have put into college for 4 years, you could probably do anything. But I think the real learning happens by doing. At some point, you're going to have to start saving. We had to go under our desk and shelter from nuclear fallout.
Welcome back to My Thin Journey, the podcast where we don't just talk about money, we talk about mastery, about taking control of your finances, your mindset, and ultimately your freedom. Today's guest is somebody who is not just playing the game, he's engineering it. Bryce Finnerty, the founder of Deal Flow Dynamics, a company that builds automated revenue streams for 7- and 8-figure businesses. He's scaled startups from 4 million to 20 million, consulted for powerhouses like Microsoft, Marriott, and Greystar, and implemented over 1,000 systems that help CEOs buy back their most valuable asset, time. Today, we get into the mindset behind the hustle, how to build businesses that run without you, and the uncomfortable truth about what most people get wrong when it comes to financial freedom. Let's dive in. Bryce, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So Bryce, you built multiple companies and helped them scale from 4 to 20 million, now pushing over 50 million. What has the mindset shift been between each stage of that growth, and what was broken every time that you helped fix to level up and grow?
Very first company, I just wanted to consult for myself, quit the day job, replace my income, feed my family, and so on. But very quickly realized that's a grind, almost like a job. And then the paychecks don't always come, and there's future famine in that world. So I was like, we got to scale and get up to a bigger size where if you lose a client, you still have most of your revenue. So I was like, I want to grow to be $1 million company, and built up a team and did that over the next few years. And then I read books like 10X and seeing people grow these companies from nothing. And I'm like, I want to do that. Like, why not? Why not? Why have such a small limit, right? But yeah, now my new target's 50 million, and that's what we're aiming for.
Bryce, thank you so much for walking us through that journey. So I guess if you could maybe dig a little deeper into the mindset, because it feels like you went from that everyday hustle, which a lot of people are maybe stuck in, to saying, hey, let me get to 1 million, which is, it feels like an arbitrary number that a lot of people kind of land on. And then to some degree, it felt like through that process of self-education, you got to a point where you looked at it and said, hey, I can grow so much further. Does that sound right? Walk us through what changed along the way.
My background was in large-scale systems in college, and I worked on some huge systems for very big companies, as you noted, some of the biggest in the world. But I never really saw myself at that level. I'm like, oh, these corporations take decades to build. But I have seen small companies grow to that 5, 10, 20 million pretty fast. To me, the mindset was, you got to build this thing to scale and always be looking for how you're going to scale and grow. And so that was my epiphany. Just build companies so they scale and grow from day one instead of grinding it out.
I love that, Bryce. And was it the mindset that there are so many small companies out there that I can 10X from 2 to 20 million, or in your case, 4 to 50 million, versus, hey, becoming the next $1 billion business is very difficult. And maybe that would be a different type of being enslaved to a hustle versus enslaved to that 9-to-5 W-2 type job.
Because I've seen some entrepreneurs who get venture capital or seed funding, and maybe they grow like all the famous success stories, right? They get Silicon Valley investors and it can grow really fast, but they also got a great deal of capital. I didn't hear any of them describe that life as free. To have Silicon Valley looking over your shoulder all day long. So I think if you want to stay outside of freedom, you might want to keep control of your own company.
So help us understand, how do you help CEOs buy back 20 hours? What is the first thing you look at?
The number one thing we do, we're building revenue, and if you follow anyone about buying back your time, the big idea is everyone's stuck doing mundane work at some level. If you can see what you're wasting your time on, the work that doesn't give you energy, or it's really not at your pay grade, if you will, then you're not in your best use. So if you really look at your day and do like a time audit, you can see that perhaps you're doing some mundane tasks. Yeah, so what we do is, some of them are just classic time and motion studies, like where are you spending your time and on what? And if you want to scale, there's a lot of ways you can scale just by focusing on how you use your time. And so if we help a leader look at how they're spending their time, it's either through delegation, they can give it to someone else, or we could find another role, maybe a more appropriate skill set for that task. Or I'm a software guy, so usually somewhere in there is the classic software play that computers are pretty good at doing some tasks. It's really just looking at how you're spending your time, and then it ties into revenue, because if you freed up that time, your billable rate's way higher than the person replacing you. So right there, you're saving money, and you start spending your time more in your high valued areas, you'll start making more money. So the return on that little bit of time, not only do you get out of doing that work, but someone else gets to do that work for you, and then you get to drive more revenue. It's a win-win. You get stuff off your plate and your company does better.
And Bryce, when people are going through this journey in terms of, maybe let's start at the high level, who is that ideal client or that ideal person or business that you're helping?
We struggle with that all the time. We have clients that are the biggest in the world, even the biggest companies with the biggest platforms and systems. They're all somewhere in there still running things on a spreadsheet in an inbox. So the ideal client is someone who wants to fix their systems, and in particular are trying to grow. Everyone has this, the reason why we talk about revenue system, it's the one thing at least Americans seem to understand: dollars. Everyone has a target, even if you're publicly traded. Your stock has a target. Your earnings per share has a target. And when they miss, their stock goes up and down. So everyone's very clear on this money thing. And so we really help them bring clarity to either how to drive revenue, automate the flow of revenue, and most importantly, what we call a revenue command center, revenue flowing through your company, and know what's working and what's not. So you ask, who is the ideal person? It's typically someone who is struggling to grow, or they know they could be growing way faster. And they know their business, say it's $1 million, but why couldn't it be 10 million? Why couldn't it be 100 million? It's usually a fast growing entrepreneur. We work a lot in the 10 community, like with Cardone Capital and Cardone Ventures, and Grant always talks about 10X. And so these top 5% companies are growing exponentially. And it's usually them. They're a victim of their own success. They're growing so fast and serving their clients that they don't have time to build their systems. Systems almost always lag behind the growth of the company. That's the ideal client. They're a victim of their own success. They've been growing, and it's more chaotic than they like, and they're in the mood to start systematizing things.
I love that response, Bryce, because you touched on something that I want to circle back to. That the ideal client is somebody who wants to fix their systems and grow. But I think it's that intentionality. And then you layered it on by saying they're a victim of their success because they're growing too fast. When you're growing too fast, it's hard to slow down and say, I'm going to say no to business to work on my infrastructure, to work on my systems, to work on building that firm foundation of the business. So when you're entering a business like this, how is it that you're actually, I know you mentioned this, but I want to dig deeper to really understand, when you're building out this process to improve efficiency for a business, was it initially just like a gut check, hey, I feel like this will help the business? Or is it a standard checklist, due diligence type process that you run through each company to see what can help improve their efficiency?
Yeah, we call it the revenue systems diagnostic, is that first step. We capture where you want to be, like what are your targets? The problem is, if you're happy the way it is, it's actually on the decline. Half because of your mindset, the other half because of inflation and other things erode, right? Your market position, but also competition is passing you. So staying the same is really almost like dying. That's why Wall Street always wants to see people growing, because to stay the same, they all know that's a kiss of death. The next step is going down. Or methodology. And it goes through the value chain of any company. The value that business brings to the market starts with its marketing. How much of the market is aware of you? And it's like awareness and branding and your ad impressions and social media impressions. Like, how many people even know you exist? And then that goes down through the marketing automation. Does that drive leads? How are those people coming to you to do business? The marketing funnel, if you will. We take a hard look at that marketing funnel, because that's really the leading indicator for revenue down the road, is how robust is your marketing and leads now. And then we move into sales. Once you know the client and they've expressed interest, they go through the sales process. We break that down and look at how that's going, all the KPIs, like your meeting rates and closure rates. And it's a lot of kind of data, which is nerdy, but it's something you should know if you're running the company, whether you love it or not. It's something, and that's the pill that we take. We actually love it. So the ideal person is, I hate that. Why don't you do it? We'll then break down how their sales are going. Usually after you sell, then you deliver what we call operations or the quote to cash cycles. You have a background in real estate. You build wealth in real estate, right? That investment today pays dividends for years and decades. We look at the revenue and expense cycle during operations. And then ultimately, how does all that tie into your financial system? Does your financial system answer any of these questions for you? We build that model customized to your business is step one to help. And we have a standard methodology for that, but every business is different. So it's important to study the actual business. I find you can't just guess at what they need without actually studying the business.
One point was that the ideal client is also somebody who doesn't necessarily want to look at all the data, because then they're in a position where they've hired you or they recognize your value and the value you're bringing to the firm to increase and improve efficiency. But it's to say, hey, we have a standard methodology that we've built and perfected over time, but we recognize every person and every business is different. So we do have to customize things to really meet people where they're at, if I understood correctly, Bryce.
Yeah, that's right. And what season of life they're in.
So do you feel like the same is true for these people or for yourself when you look at like personal finance in terms of like investment decisions and things of that nature?
Yeah, I think when it comes to personal finance, and a lot of entrepreneurs have that sort of struggle. You think entrepreneurs are rich, but I meet quite a few who have sacrificed their personal finances, don't invest in their retirement because they're investing in their business. I know some that even take money out of the house and do things like that. But I think in personal finance, you typically have to have a similar strategy. Like, what do you think you should be making? What should you be spending? How much should you be saving? Ultimately, we all struggle with the typical financial opportunities available to us. Which for most workers, it's pretty much just your 401k and then this vision of retirement. I bet you have a different story. I'm loving what's going on in the industry now is all these alternative investments that are available to people that most people aren't aware of. And so that's really, in my eyes, to, wow, I should have been investing in real estate a long time ago. I tell my kids that now.
No, that makes sense. I hear you. So I guess I agree with you on the real estate stuff, obviously, Bryce. But before we even jump into that type of topic, I wanted to tie a couple of things together, both for the audience and for myself. And since you're an expert, I also want you to clarify if I've misunderstood anything. It feels like entrepreneurs are very good at making money in X product, but some grow too fast. The problem is that they don't have the systems to manage that growth. So they would hire somebody like you to improve their systems. It feels like you've drawn a parallel to those entrepreneurs or people who don't look at their personal finances as aggressively and look at the data, just like that entrepreneur wouldn't look at the data of his business growing to fill in the cracks that start to appear. And that's where you would come in. And maybe the same is true in personal finance. Is that an assumption or assessment that you'd agree with or disagree? I'm curious to hear your thoughts because you've seen it from a very unique angle.
Yeah, I do find that even good entrepreneurs, honestly, I think a lot of people neglect their personal finance, probably even me. Our family never accomplished a rock solid, airtight budget, for example.
That's why. You couldn't track the expenses.
Yeah, I do believe that the folks who focus on something, and you're a lot about mindset. So if you are focused on some sort of monetary or financial goal, it's important that you manage how you're making money, spending money, investing money, and just being smart about that. And there's some interesting ratios that some people recommend that like you try to live on 40% of your money and save 20 and invest 40%. And so that's a pretty radical idea versus spend all of your money and maybe put 3% in retirement.
There's even communities out there that are like live on 20%, live on 10%. So it can get quite extreme. So I guess, Bryce, if you don't mind me asking, I know you alluded to real estate. I know you alluded to speaking to your kids and reflecting on the family. If you were to go back with all the knowledge you have today, and let's say you were 18, would you have invested in the same strategies that you've invested in to date? Would you do something differently? How would you approach growth?
Yeah. So now I see it totally differently. Some of the biggest playbooks that we were taught growing up was save. Of course, the education game our family played. We all grew up poor, and we knew the way to get A was to go to college and work hard and study hard. So we ran that playbook, and almost everyone in my family's got advanced degrees and moved up from immigrants from Ireland. And you see that playbook all over America. People immigrate here with nothing. They educate themselves, they work hard, they get good jobs, and their kids are even better off.
Agreed.
Playbook also says go to college, which now has big loans. I told a couple of my kids, college is not mandatory like it was for me. I feel like if you put the investment you would have put into college for 4 years, you could probably do anything. Start a business, become a triathlete, literally whatever you want.
Just to interrupt you, Bryce, maybe just drop your education qualifications for people, because I think for a lot of people, this might be controversial to say, hey, don't go to college. Go start a business instead for 4 years and see where you are 10 years later.
Yeah, I talk about a lot of this on my YouTube channel. I love coaches. I have so many coaches, and I'm in a lot of coaching programs. I deeply invest in education. So I know it's silly for me to say that. But I think the real learning happens by doing. So why would I tell my kid, don't go to college, start a business instead? Because I know they're going to grind through so many topics from sales to marketing to technology. They'll probably learn more on the job than they would in a classroom. And that's a lot of what we offer in our firm. We've learned so much by doing, building so many systems. You couldn't learn it in a course or in a book. No one has the track record of building what we build. I'm not saying there's not firms better than us. I'm just saying everyone has that unique experience they got on the job. That's my point. I didn't really learn to be an engineer until I worked in an engineering firm. Yeah, because I got my PE license or I have 2 engineering degrees. I didn't learn engineering until I had to do engineering studies and submit them to the government and get them reviewed and get my calculations scrutinized. I think you really learn by doing.
I 100% agree with you, Bryce. So with respect to learn by doing, we touched on people and their mindset with respect to personal finance. Why do you think people, like we all go through life, we all pay bills, etc. We're all told to save. But why do you think it is that most Americans don't necessarily have enough saved in their 401ks? Is there anything that you've seen when you see people scaling their businesses and the challenges that they face that helps you understand why, let's say, the average American might not have enough in savings?
Yeah, I think just the struggles of life. I believe so. If I was going to coach the younger self, the younger Bryce, we do a couple of these things. We live pretty low in terms of cars. Like we all only buy used cars and the pretty crummy ones. I've got 3 teenage drivers, so we have a lot of 10-year-old cars. The big one that catches people off guard is you're taught if you get that job, then go get a car, upgrade your lifestyle, get a nice apartment, move to the good part of town. You know, they can start going out to eat, go out with your friends, drinking, vacations. And aren't we just spending? Those aren't investments. Not one of those things I mentioned was an investment.
You're investing in your mental health, right?
You made it. You worked hard. Now you got a job and you're off to the races. If you could really keep that lifestyle low for a bit, maybe moving home after college, saving a little. If you can just flip that script from borrowing to investing, you flip the script from paying interest to making interest, which we would call an investment. An investment is something that pays you back, right? So a lot of people think your home is an investment. The next big problem. I'm pretty sure I'm underwater in my home, even though it's tripled in price.
I love that.
I seem to pay it quite a bit.
And I think you're touching on a great point, Bryce. Like lifestyle inflation versus what does freedom actually look like with a little touch of like lifestyle design. Lifestyle inflation being, hey, I worked for a year, I made $500K, I deserve to go out and buy a Bentley. Go buy a 3 Series. Still a nice car. Maybe it's not a 10-year-old used car. Maybe you buy a new one. But you don't have to blow all of your money or 30% of your money on a car or something that you would enjoy today just because you worked hard for 1 year and made a lot of money. Instead, say, if I invested that money, then I could buy multiple Bentleys in the future or whatever your lifestyle flex is. to really be more intentional with money. Does that sound like Bryce?
Yeah, I've seen people do this really well who never aspired to have a great career. My friend works at a grocery store. Still does, and went to engineering school with me. He's cool. He's got a bunch of guitars like me, likes biking like me, and he lives in an apartment in Denver. He seems to have a pretty good life. I don't think it really matters how much money you make. It's how you spend it, enjoy life. So if you're working your butt off and overspending, and that's stressing you out, that's not a good life. I think there's somewhere mixed in the lifestyle and how much you have to work to get it. And is it sustainable? You can keep going at that, but that doesn't sustain itself well as you get older. At some point, you're going to have to start saving.
Bryce? I feel like we spoke to the mature adult, Bryce speaking to his younger self who's 18. Now, if you were to talk to your younger self who just exited college, right? He's, let's say, 22 to 25, getting that first job, inflation is rampant, he's concerned about tariffs, he's concerned about all these different things. What type of 3 practical advices would you give that younger Bryce?
I would say there's a lot of weight. I remember growing up in the 80s, and there's the threat of nuclear war. We had a President Reagan who went to brinksmanship, they call it, basically head-on collision with Russia. And that ended up breaking down the Berlin Wall and everything. But it was a pretty scary time. You think tariffs were scary? We had to go under our desk and shelter from nuclear fallout on a routine basis.
Yeah.
That weighs on you as a student. So if I would tell students or young people, do not worry about world politics. You can have a beautiful, enjoy life with wonderful people who love and support you. You don't have to worry about politics unless that's your hobby. But don't carry that burden of what the superpowers are doing. Don't let it ruin your life. I hear the other side of the coin is that people are doing amazing things. Talk to a guy who lives in Nicaragua and surfs and does a very similar job that I have, revenue operations. And they're like, wow, I wish I'd thought of that. Live in Nicaragua and surf. So I'm still seeing a lot of people breaking that mold and create the life you want. And there's a lot of great people on this planet, and most of them are not out to get you. I'd say no one's really out to get you. If you're carrying that burden, let that one go. I'm just saying, don't carry that burden of global affairs on your shoulders. That would be my advice. That would be the one big one. And then I'd say location freedom is something you can get away with only at that time. I've driven back and forth across the country at least 20 or 30 times. I've been to at least 30 countries. You can travel. Don't let that myth say you're stuck in your town. If you can afford 5 tanks of gas, you can get to California. Jump in your car and go somewhere. Move somewhere else. So I would say while you're young, before you get planted and have kids and school districts and stuff like that, please go out and travel and experience what you want to experience, whatever's in your heart. Go do it. You have no chance now, like while you're still single, and there's jobs in every town. You can move to another town and get a job.
Bryce, thank you for that. Now, obviously, you dropped a lot of wisdom, which I appreciate. Where is the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to continue the conversation?
I'd say you can connect with me on LinkedIn or my company's website, dealflowdynamics.com. You can set up a meeting there.
Thank you, Bryce. From my perspective, there's a lot of different things that you've touched on that I thought was very interesting, whether it's just your perspective on lifestyle design and your real world example of living below your means. I think the way you paralleled your life versus a surfer in Nicaragua and a friend of yours who works in the grocery store, to just say education doesn't necessarily mean you'll have a certain outcome. That outcome is what you make of it. And it's very easy to have a preconceived notion or bias around that. But the reality is everyone is living a great life and no one's out to get you. So I really love that perspective. And even you drilling down how you help businesses, I think is really applicable. I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast or watch it on YouTube do find it. They are entrepreneurs. They do run their own businesses. So I'm sure they'll find it insightful to connect with you. Once again, if you found value in today's episode, take action, subscribe, share it with somebody who's stuck in the grind or who's looking to scale or who's been scaling aggressively and knows they need help from somebody like Bryce. Leave us a review so that we can keep bringing on guests like Bryce. Until next time, keep learning and remember, your financial journey is yours to design.
My background was in large-scale systems in college, and I worked on some huge systems for very big companies, as you noted, some of the biggest in the world. But I never really saw myself at that level. I was like, I want to grow to be $1 million company. If you lose a client, you still have most of your revenue. What I have seen small companies grow to that 5, 10, 20 million pretty fast. Top 5% companies are growing exponentially. Competition is passing you. The ideal person is, I hate that. Why don't you do it? I feel like if you put the investment you would have put into college for 4 years, you could probably do anything. But I think the real learning happens by doing. At some point, you're going to have to start saving. We had to go under our desk and shelter from nuclear fallout.